Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to this event, Riyadh Blue Talk, that is organized by the Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, the Embassy of Portugal, and the Embassy of Kenyan Republic. This conference is mainly to raise awareness about the UN International Conference that will be held in Lisbon from 27th to the 1st of July 2022. We have physical attendance, and also we have online programs through YouTube channel. It's live, and the program will be for 2.5 hours, and we will have two sessions, panel sessions that we come to. But before we go into that, I would like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Natalie Porter, the UN Resident Coordinator in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to deliver.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Dr. Osama bin Fakiha, Deputy Minister of Environment, Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture, Your Highness, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, guests, colleagues, and those joining virtually. It's my pleasure, along with Ambassador Matthias and Ambassador Ogego, to welcome you all to this Riyadh Blue Talk in support of the UN Ocean Conference, which, as mentioned by my colleague Abdul Majid, is organized by the United Nations and co-hosted by Kenya and Portugal. The UN Ocean Conference, as you know, will be held in Lisbon from 27th to 1st of July. The Riyadh Blue Talk is not an isolated event. It's part of a global action to raise awareness on ocean in preparation for the UN Ocean Conference. Blue Talk events will be held across the globe and come at a critical time as the world seeks to address the many deeply rooted problems of our societies, while also responding to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we struggle to prevent a looming food crisis. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has stepped up its commitment to environment and has launched last year the Middle East and the Saudi Green Initiative, aimed at addressing some of the devastating effects of climate change. Recently, the government of Saudi Arabia announced the establishment of the Red Sea Authority, a new body to protect the coral reefs and sea turtles in the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia has more than 2,000 kilometers of coastline, the largest in the region, with 30% of the kingdom's population living within 100 kilometers of the coastline. This enormous coastline is home to diverse marine ecosystems and the basis for the future blue economy of the kingdom. Considering the valuable contributions and efforts that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has made to the conservation of marine environment at national, regional, and global level, we are glad to gather stakeholders from government, private sector, civil society, academia, regional and international organizations to exchange knowledge and solutions and build partnerships to solve pressing challenges. The environment is a key priority for the UN globally and in the kingdom as well. The UN in Saudi Arabia supports the kingdom in its progress toward the achievement of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Vision 2030. We are working on a 5-year development cooperation framework with the government, which has a strong focus on planet. We have also established a dedicated environment, natural resources and climate advisory working group within the UN country team to enhance international internal UN coordination, and improve support to the government of environment. The UN Secretary General firmly believes that solutions are possible and that we can reverse the current trends to bring considerable improvements to our environment. With this optimism in mind, I look forward to learning more and hope that the discussions today will inform the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon and create new ways of working towards an effective solution to better preserve our ocean. Your Excellencies, Ambassador Matias and Ambassador Ogego, thank you for your collaboration on this event. It's the first time we have combined our efforts in this way, and I hope this collaboration will be the first of many. A special thank as well to my team and to UNWT for their hospitality. I thank you very much for your presence and wish you and us a successful dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Natalie Austria. Now I have the pleasure to invite His Excellency Dr. Osama bin Ibrahim Faqihan, the Deputy Minister for Environment of the Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture. Please.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be with you here to participate in this special event of Blue Talk organized by the United Nations. I'd like to first of all thank Your Excellency Natalie for inviting me here, and thank the United Nations and the Embassy of Portugal and Embassy of Kenya for organizing this event to really exchange information and knowledge about a very important environmental aspect of our planet, which is our ocean. As you know, Vision 2030, launched by His Majesty the Custodian of the Holy Mosque, and His Royal Highness, placed a central role for environmental protection, coming out from a deep conviction that economic development and prosperity cannot be complete without environmental protection and social development. And because of that, the Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture was established back in the middle of 2016, followed by the approval of the National Environmental Strategy, which really included a comprehensive assessment of all environmental challenges and opportunities and means to intensify the focus on environmental protection. That was followed by a complete restructuring of the institutional setup of the environmental sector in Saudi Arabia that resulted in creating of 5 specialized national environmental sectors that addressing national priorities: the National Center for Environmental Compliance to monitor the compliance of thousands of facilities from cradle to grave; the National Center for Waste Management to extend the kingdom into a circular economy, maximizing recycling, minimizing waste and regeneration, and maximizing utilization of waste and reducing the waste diversion to landfills; the National Center to Combat Desertification, addressing a very important national challenge related to the vegetation cover and vegetation and desertification; the National Center for Wildlife, which we have the CEO with us here, Dr. Korban, and the National Center for Meteorology. Also, the National Environmental Fund, the largest in the region, has been also created to incentivize environmentally friendly technologies, and ensure that financial sustainability of the environmental sector was also created. Also, the environmental police has been created as part of the Ministry of Interior to provide support for the environmental sector to enforce regulations. More recently, we have also various entities created. We have the General Authority, or General Organization for Coral Reef and Turtles to intensify the focus on a very important marine habitats and marine species. And the marine, also the Red Sea Authority were created to intensify the focus on the marine environment. We are also now creating the largest maybe company in the world for oil spill response. We just received, very recently the royal approval to create the company, and I can go on to list many of these work. As mentioned by Her Excellency Natalie, these are all crowned by the announcement of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, the Green Initiative, which has very ambitious target to increase the use of renewable energy, reduce carbon emissions, increase the vegetation cover, announcing very ambitious target in the vegetation cover, planting 10 billion trees, rehabilitating 40 million hectares, and increasing the protected areas to 30%, both marine and terrestrial, and many other initiatives to protect biodiversity, enhance recycling, and improve sustainability. Also, the Middle East Green Initiative to enhance regional collaboration to really address land degradation, desertification, enhance biodiversity, and enhance the resilience and mitigation adaptation to climate change. The initiative is really, we are very active into really founding the initiative with targeting more than 40 countries to be members, both in Asia and Africa in the initiative. On the international front, Saudi Arabia is fairly active. We hosted the G20 countries meetings in 2020 that resulted in a really historic communique by the environmental ministers. By the way, G20 has always focused on energy and climate, very important issues, but really we believe that environment is also more comprehensive and bigger. And because of that, for the first time, we created an environmental track in G20 to cover other topics, in addition to maintaining the track on energy and climate. And as a result, 2 global initiatives were launched and adopted by G20 and supported by G20 leaders. The global platform to accelerate R&D to conserve coral reefs, headquartered in KAUST, and we seek partnership globally by G20 and non-G20 countries and institutions, and the global initiative to reduce land degradation, enhance conservation of terrestrial habitats. Both are very important initiatives with very large scope, both in terms of the geographical coverage, in terms of the environmental challenges it addresses, and the impact both economically and socially. Finally, really, development and growth, both nationally and globally, for all of us, cannot really be sustained without due consideration for environment, to really ensure prosperous future for us and for the generation. With this, I repeat my thanks for the United Nations and for the embassies of Kenya and Portugal for organizing this important Blue Talk in preparation for the UN Conference on Oceans in Lisbon. where we have really a large delegation from Saudi Arabia will be participating, covering many stakeholders. Many of the faces I see here now, really very eager and talk to me a lot about the preparation to be actively engaged in Lisbon, to be part of making that conference an international success, and really fulfill the global aspiration to really look for blue oceans and really contribute to the conservation of the ocean habitats that we believe it's the essence of life in this planet. Without our oceans, there wouldn't be life in planet Earth. We have to always remember the water comes from the ocean, and the oxygen that comes from the ocean, and all the other aspects of the ocean that are central to our continuity of life on this planet. Without further ado, thank you very much, and we look forward to be engaged in today's panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for this inspiring statement and making spotlight on the efforts of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in environment conservation. And now it gives me a pleasure to introduce. We have a message from Ambassador Peter Thompson. He is the UN Secretary General, Special Envoy for the Ocean, and he has been leading on the International Ocean Conference. So please, can you play the video?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed, and many thanks for the opportunity of addressing you today. It's not long now before many of us will meet in person at the UN Ocean Conference between 27 June and the 1st of July in Lisbon, and I look forward to that. As I'm sure you know, the UN Ocean Conferences are held in support of SDG 14, the UN's Sustainable Development Goal to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. It is my firm belief that SDG 14 and the sustainable blue economy are crucial for humanity's future on this planet. The ocean's health is vital to us all, vital in the truest sense of the word, necessary for life. Just consider the fact that over 50% of the planet's oxygen is produced in the ocean, and that statement has all the veracity it needs. That is why my daily mantra is no healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is measurably in decline. Measurement of the decline is observable in rates of habitat destruction, overfishing, subsidizing of industrial fleets, through the polluting source-to-sea flow of chemicals and plastics, and through accelerating rates of the ocean's acidification, deoxygenation, and warming, leading to worldwide death of coral, changing ocean currents, transformation of marine ecosystems, and inexorably rising sea levels. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we can stop the decline of the ocean's health. We can do so in 2022. And we made a great start in Nairobi in February with UNEA's agreement to begin work on a binding global treaty to end plastic pollution. We must continue this positive momentum by ending harmful fisheries subsidies through the WTO in Geneva, by agreeing in New York upon a robust and operable BB&J treaty for the governance of the high seas, by adopting the 30 by 30 target, the biodiversity COP in Kunming, and by moving the climate finance needle decisively in the direction of the sustainable blue economy at UNFCCC's COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. 2022's highlight opportunity for SDG 14 progress will be the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. There we will launch a great fleet of science-based solutions, heavily powered by innovation and partnerships. And I urge you all to bring the best of your ideas, solutions, and resources to the conference in Lisbon next month. The hard work is at hand. We must stop the decline in the ocean's health, and as I've described in my words today, we can do so as early as this year. That is not a throwaway line. It is very doable. Thus, it is vital, again, that word vital in its truest sense, that the international community does not squander this year's unparalleled confluence of opportunities for ocean action. And I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the participants. Now we have two panel discussions on the topics of the conference. The first one will be moderated by His Excellency Mr. Nuno Matias. He is the Ambassador of Portugal to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I will hand over the panel discussion. We have about 40 minutes for the panel discussion, the first one, actually 50 minutes. And then once we finish, we will move to the second panel discussion. So please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the special envoy, and special thank you to the Deputy Minister for your wisdom, your words of wisdom, and to encapsulate in this, I think, very fortunate phrase: no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. I think we can do it. So let's all dive in. As it was said, I'm the Portuguese ambassador to Saudi Arabia. I'm delighted to be here as we gear up to the Oceans Conference in partnership with Kenya. I'm very proud to be here with my Kenyan colleague. I have a very distinguished panel. I'm going to briefly just name the members of our panel. We will hear first from the Principal Secretary for Shipping and Maritime and Special Envoy of Maritime and Blue Economy, Ambassador Nancy Karigitu from Kenya. She will join us on a video conference. Then we will hear from Dr. Maher Amir. He is the coordinator of Marine Protected Areas Network in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, Persica. After, we will hear from Dr. Mohamed Kurban, the CEO of National Center for Wildlife. And finally, last but not least, we will hear from Dr. Omar Alates, the Deputy Chief Environment Sustainability Officer of the Red Sea. So, as it was said, our first panel is on the topic of managing, protecting, conserving, and restoring marine and coastal ecosystems. This alone would last a whole day. So let's try to keep it short. We have 50 minutes. I'm basically looking for some impressions from the panelists so that maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion. The guiding question that I have for our first speaker, who is joining us from Kenya, is kind of, where are we in terms of the marine conservation agenda in global scale? What are the prospects of achieving SDG 14, and how other regions, and I think this is, important that we have our guests from Kenya, how are other regions doing in terms of balancing conservation on one side and development needs on the other? So without further ado, I give the floor to the Principal Secretary for Shipping and Maritime and Special Envoy of Maritime and Blue Economy of Kenya, Ambassador Nancy Karigitu. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, organizers, participants, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings to you all from Kenya, Nairobi. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this very important event for inviting me to speak and on such a very important topic. Let me start by saying that the Sustainable Development Goals were the outcome of an intergovernmental process considered by some as the most democratic and inclusive accomplishment in the history of the United Nations. And it is no surprise that a standalone SDG, that is the SDG 14, is dedicated to the oceans and their conservation and sustainable use. SDG 14 emphasizes the need to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. This is no less because the maritime domain is the cornerstone of the livelihood of humanity. We've heard that from the special envoy and previous speakers. Habitat resources, and also accounts for transport routes for up to 90% of global trade. It's very important for national economies, especially those of developing nations. But notwithstanding all this importance, the marine ecosystems have been threatened, their diversity, biodiversity, human health, and social well-being because of human action. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to put us into context in terms of SDG 14 attainment. We'll start by the year 2020, which was a most extraordinary event in human history because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected all human life, cost us so far over 6 million lives, has devastated the global economy, and upended all spheres of human life. The pandemic's related economic downturn has pushed between 119 to 124 million people further down to extreme poverty from 2020, thus compounding challenges to poverty eradication and also attainment of the SDGs. So the global community is at a very critical moment in its pursuit of the SDGs, and indeed the current crisis threatens decades of development gains and further delays the urgent transition to greener, more inclusive economies, throwing the progress on the SDGs even more precariously off track. Now, progress in many target areas of SDG 14 has not been spared. This has slowed down the advancement that had already been attained. Let me look at a few areas of where we are, beginning with the number of dead zones in the world's coastal waters, which is growing at a very alarming rate. Observations indicate a continuous decline in potential hydrogen over the past 20 to 30 years, and ocean acidification is on the rise, threatening marine organism and ocean-based services. The sustainability of our oceans demands renewed efforts, renewed commitment to safeguard key biodiversity areas. We look at the implementation of international instruments to conserve and responsibly use ocean resources, which remains uneven, highlighting the need for increased support, particularly for developing nations. And the long-term impact of COVID pandemic on fisheries poses very significant challenges that threaten and undermine sustainable stock management and profitability. Very critical also, funding for marine research pales in comparison to the enormous economic contribution that we know the world oceans give us, which has remained unmatched. And while many states have ratified or acceded to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and its implementing agreements, a number of states have also implemented the policy and institutional legal frameworks that are required to see this through. We see the need for further progress, which is needed, especially, again, in some developing countries, and in particular, the least developed nations. It is expected, as has been said, that the United Nations Ocean Conference, scheduled for 27th June and 1st July this year in Lisbon, Portugal, will further accelerate efforts and commitments towards achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Allow me now to dab a little on the various regional initiatives before I get to internationals that are in place with the aim of achieving the SDG 14. And I'll start by saying that various regions have come up with policy statements, and I'll begin with the African Integrated Maritime Strategy, and also Agenda 2063, the Africa We Want, which have laid emphasis on the blue economy for continental transformation and growth. I will also touch on the Western Indian Ocean countries' progress towards achieving the SDGs, beginning with the Nairobi Convention for Protection, Management, and Development of the Western Indian Ocean. And we see that the Western Indian Ocean states have made commitments to the attainment of the 2030 agenda, and particularly SDG 14. And some of the initiatives under this initiative include ongoing drafting of a protocol on integrated coastal zones management strategy in line with, again, among other SDGs, the SDG 14, adoption of a climate change strategy in 2016, adoption of an approach for incorporating marine spatial planning, implementation of strategic action program to reduce impacts from land-based sources, and also the Western Indian Ocean strategic plan. And coming back home where we are today in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden area, I just mentioned briefly the Regional Organization for the Conservation of the Environment in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, also known as PASGA. And the Jeddah Convention and Red Sea and Gulf of Aden countries have demonstrated very strong efforts towards achieving SDG 14, and among other issues that have been mentioned by a previous speaker, I'll mention the establishment of the regional network for the marine protected areas, which has been in place since 2005. And also recent increase of the marine protected areas coverage by 21.6%. There is also the development of the regional standard survey methods, manual for monitoring key habitats and also species in the area, and establishment of the regional center for mutual aids during marine pollution emergencies. Ladies and gentlemen, the international organizations have also been very key, and here I will mention the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, which recently launched the new Ocean Action Agenda, built upon knowledge and science, transformative recommendations and actions. The United Nations Environmental Program, Regional Seas Program, which addresses acceleration of degradation of the world's oceans and coastal areas by engaging neighboring countries in comprehensive and specific actions to protect their shared marine resources. Most important, let me say, the International Maritime Organization, which provides technical assistance and capacity building and undertakes projects on sustainable use and governance of oceans. And here, allow me to mention two key projects that are under the purview of the IMO. One of them being the Global MTCC Network Project, which has set up no less than 5 maritime technology cooperation centers in order to build capacities for climate change mitigation in Africa, in Asia, Caribbean, Latin America, and the Pacific Ocean. And the second one being the GLOLITA Partnership Project, which is supporting developing countries, including small island developing states and least developed countries in reducing marine plastic litter from sea-based sources. The UNEA resolution has been mentioned, which comprises a resolution from 175 nations recently here in Nairobi, who endorsed the development of an international legally binding instrument that will see the full life cycle of plastic from source to sea being addressed. It is hoped that this agreement will strengthen global coordination, cooperation, and governance to take immediate actions towards long-term elimination of plastic pollution in marine and other environments, thus in effect complementing in a very strong manner the implementation of SDG 14. Ladies and gentlemen, when all is said and done, the realization of SDG 14 is dependent on adequate human resource and technological capacity, and developing nations are faced with the challenge of limited funds to build the adequate human resource and technological capacity needed for the attainment of SDG 14. So ongoing strategic partnerships and cooperation create a promising environment in order to facilitate the sharing of knowledge, capacity building, and technology transfer to facilitate the prospects of achieving SDG 14 and sustainable development of our oceans. We encourage, of course, collaboration in this area to ensure that nobody is left behind on the voyage towards SDG 14. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank once again the Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, the Embassy of Portugal, and the Embassy of Kenya in Riyadh for organizing this outreach event ahead of the UN Ocean Conference, and also for giving me the opportunity to participate. I encourage all of you to participate in the conference that's coming to be held from 27th June to 1st July in Lisbon, Portugal, and I look forward to meeting and seeing and talking and encouraging one another on this journey to SDG 14. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your comments and this call that you made again on the need to renew our efforts and our commitments towards the oceans. Thank you to you and to Kenya for the extraordinary work and the leading work that Kenya has been doing in many areas of conservation, and namely, as you mentioned more at the end, the work at UNEA in Nairobi in terms of the elimination of plastics in marine ecosystems. I think it's extremely relevant. So thank you again. Now, if you allow me, I would like to maybe focus a little more on one of the issues within our panel, which is the marine protected areas, also known as MPAs, especially in addressing the transboundary marine issues in the Red Sea and the Rope-Me Sea area. So to help us in this area, I would call on Dr. Maher Amir to maybe enlighten us a little bit on these issues and hopefully help us understand a little bit better. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa as'ad Allah masaakum bikul khair. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Secretary General, Secretary General Professor Ziad Abu Harara, who wish productive Blue Talk, and special thanks to UN Resident Coordinator Mrs. Natalie and the Embassies of Portugal and Kenya for co-hosting and organizing this important dialogue. I will throw some light on PERSICA activities for the conservation of the Red Sea hotspot, Red Sea as a hotspot of biodiversity and the marine resources, and also with special references on the rules of MBAs as rule of PERSICA MBAs as MBAs network as for addressing transboundary marine issues. First, PERSICA is an intergovernmental organization caring with the Red Sea and the sustainable uses of its resources. Member states beside Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. Our headquarters based in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and we have also, as mentioned, Mrs. Nancy, a mutual center for aid during emergency based in Hurghada, Egypt. Our legal framework is Jeddah Convention in 1982, and it's driven with the protocols and the regional action plan of Jeddah Convention. We are caring with the Red Sea and its biodiversity because the Red Sea is very important for the region. The Red Sea is unique and occurred at the most arid area of the world, characterized by high water temperature, high evaporation rate, high salinity, and it's a deep sea, semi-enclosed, no inflowing rivers, and that's lead to a eutrophic condition. The Red Sea is very poor with primary production. The Red Sea never will be fishing ground, but these limited resources is with very high ecological and economic value. On the other hand, the Gulf of Aden, characterized by high production and considered one of the most reached fishing ground on the world. This unique condition of the Red Sea leads to the occurred many unique species. So the rate of endemic species there in the Red Sea is very high. Endemic species, that species occurred only and flourish in the Red Sea. But these limited resources with high value, ecological or economic, faced many challenges in the Red Sea, like habitat alteration and degradation, pollution from sea and land-based activities, overfishing, climate change drivers, and beside all that is the poor management of these resources and activities. Many experts and studies stated that all the coral reef ecosystem in the world suffering from global warming and human activities, and even under the most optimistic scenarios, most of the coral reef ecosystem in the world, where in Australia, the Maldives, the Caribbean, will have disappeared or will be in bad shape or and the bad situation and the condition at the end of this century, except the Red Sea. The coral in the Red Sea will especially reference to the north parts and the Gulf of Aqaba, set to resist, withstand, and resilient to and recover from the global warming. This gives us real hope that we can save the list. We can save at least one major coral reef ecosystem for future generation. From this point, Perska's strategic main goal is to protect and manage sustainable uses of the Red Sea resources and the biodiversity. Due to the fluid nature of water, like the atmosphere, most ocean ecosystems have transboundary properties as the water and the species move across the national jurisdiction. Therefore, to some extent, most effective marine conservation includes some transboundary cooperation between neighboring regions. From this point, and during 2005, Perska member states signed a protocol for the conservation of biological diversity and establishment of marine protected areas network in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. The result of this protocol, there's a network composed of more than 12 MPAs covering all the habitat and the key species in the region. And I think now all the MPAs around the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden joined the Perska MPAs network. The main objective of Perska MPAs network is the capacity, raising the capacity of the member state for the all parts of management and the planning the MPAs, the sustainable uses of living marine resources, involve local communities and the stakeholders in the process of planning and the management of MPAs, and conserve representative and prime examples of the biodiversity and enhance public awareness for the marine resources and the biodiversity. Also, Perska MPAs network can serve a variety of purposes, conserving marine biodiversity, protecting important ecosystem, habitat species, and the cultural resources, supporting scientific research, enhance fish stocks, providing places and opportunities for tourism and education. Also, Perska MPAs network facilitating the protection of ecosystem or species that can be adequately protected in one country, such as migratory species, and enhancing the level of attention to giving to transboundary protected areas so that they receive adequate attention, sharing effective conservation and approaches across similar sites in different regions, and strengthening capacity by sharing experiences and lessons learned. From this point, The role of MBA's network for addressing transboundary marine issues in the Red Sea and Gulf Aden are clearly apparent in three components: the key habitats, conservation of the key habitats, conservation of the key species, and the conservation of the fish stocks. For the conservation of the key habitat and the key species, Persica prepared regional action plans for the conservation of all key habitat. We have a regional action plan for the conservation of coral reef, for the seagrass, for the mangrove, for the salt marshes. All this regional action plan based on national action plan from Persica member states. Also, we also prepared regional action plan for the conservation of the mega charismatic fauna, marine fauna like sharks, like marine mammals, turtles, seabirds. All this we have a regional action plan and implementing with member state. And this regional action plan based on national action plan prepared by the national states. Sorry. The role of Persica public design and the manage MBAs in protecting marine habitat and fish stocks. The fish stocks in the Red Sea MBAs generally provided for basic benefit, the conservation of Persica through the fish stocks. We are this plans protection of specific life stage. All life stages mostly occurred inside the MBAs, like nursery ground, and the critical function of the fish stocks, like the feeding ground and spawning ground, also occurred inside the MBAs. So by establishing MBAs, we can conserve and sustainable use of the stock of the fish all over the Red Sea. Also, the MBAs provide dispersion centers for supply of larvae to the fishery. Also, the declaration of no-take zone inside the MBAs. This is no-take are free from fishing and harvesting, and so far as practicable, protected from other human impact. Finally, I need to see that, to tell you that the declaration of Persica MBA's network help the countries to implement their national action plan for the MBAs. We prepare action plan for all Persica MBAs, prepare management plan for two MBAs in Sudan and in Djibouti, and also update the management plan in the zoning plan, one in Egypt, and also prepare an integrated management plan for a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Sudan, declared 2016. And finally, the role of Persica MBA's network being effective and useful only if the MBAs are managed effectively. And there is a working management, zoning, and financial plan for each MBAs, and this plan must be reviewed and evaluated annually. At the end of each year, Persica, we evaluate the management effectiveness of all MBAs network. And last January, we found that there is an improvement of management effectiveness of about 70% of Persica MBAs network, and the high improvement occurred that inside the MBAs that we are make some intervention. We installed some mooring buoys for conservation of coral reef in some sites. We prepared some we prepared some label, some platform, some and bring some pamphlet for some MBAs inside Persica, and found that that MBAs we achieve some intervention, there an improvement for the management effectiveness of these MBAs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maher Amer, for your presentation, for highlighting the importance of the Red Sea in terms of its limited resources and also with its high value in terms of ecological ecosystems. And for, I believe it was extremely important to hear from you on the very relevant and leading role that Persica is doing regarding MPAs in both the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. So thank you very much for your presentation. I would like now to dive a little bit deeper into the concept of marine protected areas, MPAs, and invite, I'm very privileged that we have here with us the CEO of the National Center for Wildlife, Dr. Mohammed Kurban. Dr. Kurban is the designated lead of Saudi Arabia to be the lead of the delegation of Saudi Arabia to the UN Oceans Conference in Lisbon. We're very, very happy that you will be leading the delegation. And I've just learned that the Saudi Arabia will have a side event in Lisbon on the focus on research and innovation has key pillars of regenerating development of the Red Sea. So very much focus on what we're talking today. So for you, Dr. Kurban, and if you may, again, trying to go deeper into the concept of MPAs, how do you see how to promote more partnerships in one hand in terms of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to establish a wider ecologically and efficiently connected network of MPAs? You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really happy to be with you here today, and very much we are going to focus today about the promoting partnership to establish wider ecologically and effectively connected networks of marine protected areas. So maybe we have a presentation there can help to understand some points. But before we start, how important they are, we need to look and talk about the impact unfortunately coming to our oceans and seas. The impact really become very high from shallow to deep, from top to bottom, with all impacts coming to the oceans. Of course, we have two types of impacts, naturally and human activities. Naturally, as we discussed many times, the climate change, but the human also activities, loss of really cause loss of biodiversity, the impact of raising sea level, increasing acidity, decreased productivity, the availability of oxygen, all those type of impacts really impacting our seas and oceans. So and also at the same time, there is increasing global, regional, national interest in the economic and social opportunities provided by the growing of ocean economy. So to ensure really a medium and long-term sustainability, it is important to enhance strategies that enables marine and coastal resources to remain resilient. So for this, the marine protected areas key to sustainable use of our ocean and seas resources. So the marine protected areas really very important for protecting our ecosystems, habitat, the conservation of our biodiversity, of course, the supporting the scientific research, enhancing the fish stocks as a food security, providing places and opportunities for tourism, and this is what we are doing right now. Next, please. So what is here we're gonna focus on the marine protected areas networks. The networks of the marine protected areas refer to collection of individuals areas that are ecologically connected. So it's very important to have this network to work all the marine protected areas to help and support our ecosystems as well as the biodiversity. The MBA networks promote robust, large-scale conservation of the areas, and we have different species of MBA, different examples of MBA networks. So I'm not saying about the type of MBA; it's about the type of networking. The example we have here, the conservation. When we focus on marine protected areas in conservation of special kind of organism like coral reef, like seagrass, or whatever kind of ecosystem or biodiversity management. When we are focusing on the management of the areas and connectivity, of course, when we have connected marine protected areas, that it will help the biodiversity for refugees from area to another area. Next, please. So when we talk, of course, we don't need to forget the social economic benefits, which is very important from positive point of view. Of course, promotion of access to sustainably managed resources by small scale fisheries, protection of habitat and species, biodiversity are the basis of growing marine basis economic activities. With those two, it will lead us development of coastal and marine sustainable tourism. Next, please. Here, I will talk about what we have in Saudi Arabia right now. And what we have right now, the marine protected areas is 5.5%. As you can see, the red color in the Arabian Gulf and Red Sea. The ambition of really in the direction from His Royal Highness, Prince Mohammed, our Crown Prince, to increase the protected area to 30% in marine and 30% terrestrial. We did not put the terrestrial here because we are focusing on the marine part. So we are now hoping that the ambition to go from 5.5 to 30% by 2030. So in the beginning, we're going to focus on 2025 to 24%, and maybe this is going to be the difficult part, but we will go through it, inshallah. And the second phase will be from 24% to 30% by 2030. And by the way, those green, the ambition that we have to future marine protected areas based on the ecological and biodiversity for all those locations. It has been studied almost a year ago, and which shows this one to be protected areas. Next, please. Here in this lovely picture, you can see maybe we focus on the biodiversity and richness of different type of fish and megafauna. So what do you want? What is possible? If you go to past, you can see no any kind of impact, and the level of protection was very high because the human activities was very low. Now, the present, you can see the reduction of the organisms. Unfortunately, the biodiversity, the increase as well as the richness, very low. Now, what is the possible that we really can help our protect through the MBA, the marine protected areas? We can have, we divide it to 4 categories, and those 4 really change between the biodiversity and richness between area to area. So the fully protected area, as you can see, is full and becomes like past, and the highly protected area decreased a little bit, but is still protected, lightly start to decline, and minimally, which will be heavily impacted. So the more sustainable use of the ocean can really conserve and restore biodiversity and the resilient ecosystems. Next, please. Those are our partners. By the way, this is the main ones, but still we have more. And trust me, the page cannot take all of them. But those are really the main ones that we can deal with them as a partner for the marine protected area networks. Next, please. So what we are doing really right now, we are focusing in 3 levels of partnerships. Number 1, the collaborative knowledge management and an integrated participatory planning, and effective governance. For each one of those, the data gathered, and we review the whole the data, and we need to look at the gaps. What gaps we have, then we have to fill with our partnership. So plus we can look at the ecosystem that we have right now and what is the evaluation of those ones. Then we can use the governance to manage all the marine protected areas. And by the way, with all those three, we can really look in depth for all our ecosystems and biodiversity in our seas. And as you know, we are part of the world, so the connectivity will be very high. Next, please. So I will go to, in conclusion, the promoting partnership, building partnership is very important as a mandate of the National Center for Wildlife with all our partners. So by establishing a mechanism for coordination around common conservation objectives, a national system provide opportunities for marine protected areas work together more effectively. And plus enhancing the stewardship, the national system will help protect our marine protected areas against the harmful effects of activities through enhanced regional coordination, public awareness, site management, capacity, and recognition of these marine protected areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kurban, for your very visual and engaging presentation. I think you've given us a lot to chew ahead of the UN Oceans Conference, and certainly have given us a great view of KSA, what KSA is doing in terms of enabling MPAs. Going back to the map that you presented, it's very impressive to see how much of it is covered. I mean, almost all of the Red Sea coast is going to be covered by MPAs, which is rather extraordinary. So thank you again. Last but not least, we have reached the last speaker of this first panel, Dr. Omar Al-Attas from the Red Sea Development Company. And to you, sir, I wanted to ask if you could, again, broaden the scope a little bit and go in terms of the economic value of marine ecosystems. How much do you think is incorporated into the national development policy? And what are the potential for promoting the blue economy and the marine ecosystem in terms of ecotourism in the kingdom? You have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you so much. First, I'd like to share with you a good news. Recently, I got promoted to be from the deputy to the head of the Department of Environmental Sustainability within the Red Sea Development Company, Anamala.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. And first of all, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, dear guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, and the UN for the invitation. Definitely, it gives me a great pleasure to share with all of you an amazing journey that I'm going to take you through on how we are now working on developing exquisite destinations that is going to be in harmony with the environment, taking into consideration environmental protection, ensuring sustainability that is embedded as a pillar across all the functions that we do within the Red Sea. Just to give you a feel of where the projects are, they are between Dhiba, north of Neom, and north of Umluj, and that is where it covers most of Amala and the Red Sea. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, before we go and dive into that, we are really blessed with unrevealed natural beauty. And when I want to emphasize with the unrevealed, I lived all my life here in Saudi Arabia. I was extremely surprised when I visited that site, when I first got in touch with the Red Sea as part of the work that we were working on when I used to be with the Authority of Meteorology and Environmental Protection. It's incredible with the biodiversity that it's rich in. When we talk about the mangroves, the other types that are there, the forest that they are along that part of the coast with these islands. When we talk about the coral reefs, not only that, we are now having around 8 types of coral reef habitats with more than 314 species that are recorded up to now. And by the way, with the time, I'm going to share with you what are our assessment, our monitorings that definitely led us to find the beauty that we are blessed with as a national treasure. The terrestrial parts, the mountains that we have around 50 dormant volcanoes in the area that we're trying so much to find, to bring to the beauty. Let people know, let the whole kingdom and the whole world what we are really blessed with. Marine animals, we have around 280 species that are recorded up to now. We have amazing record of dugongs that we have found that is considered recently to be among the extinct species. We're going to talk about the birds and the endangered species and the turtles and how definitely the biodiversity that is rich in that area. Can we go to the next one, please? So first, I'll share with you the vision of the development. They are definitely focused on development of the 2 exquisite luxury destinations that are created around one of the world's hidden natural treasures, and definitely through that pioneering the partnership between luxury tourism and protecting the environment. And then the main goal, and imagine this is coming from a development where most of the developments around the world, they focus on their goals. Definitely we have set our goals to new standards in sustainable developments. Again, pioneering Saudi Arabia on the global tourism map and fulfill all the objectives and the goals as part of the Saudi Arabia 2030 vision. Just to give you a feel, and on the next slide, on how big is the project. I'm just gonna focus on one part of it, which is the Red Sea. I'm not gonna move into Amala because of the restriction of the time. This is kind of to give you a feel of what we have. We are blessed with more than 90 islands. But just to show you the commitment that we have to the environment and the sustainability, we definitely gonna be only developing around 22. We're gonna let the others to be reserved and to protect the marine life that is definitely around it. These are the islands that we have over here, and this is just a feel of the projects, as I said, and the way that it is moves. And our efforts there are not just only to develop projects near the water, but definitely we have inland as well. Can we go to the next one? The way that it's set on multi-layers for the protection of the environment. So the group or the company itself has an entity to ensure environmental compliance and also to make sure that sustainability is a cross-function within the development. But there is another layer that we have within what's called the special economic zone that these projects are within for both Amala and the Red Sea. And the main goals for the environment within the special economy zone is to protect and preserve. And you're going to see a word there that's in bold, that is enhancing, where unlike the existing best practices, where they were going to do, let's minimize the negative environmental impact, we are boldly striving to enhance the environment. The main slogan that we always put there and as a goal, we don't want to just follow the best practices. We want to be the standard for the best practices. And in order to achieve that, we are working. And by the way, these are not plans. This is ongoing now, and definitely we have achieved great length of it. We are working on developing a world-class leading environmental regulatory framework. And I have to stop for that for a minute. Now, I'm a bit biased. I came definitely from an entity that they have worked. Before joining the Red Sea, I was with the Authority of Meteorology and Environmental Protection, and then later being the Deputy CEO for the National Center of Environmental Compliance. We are blessed within the kingdom with strong environmental law. This is a blessing that we are now starting on an amazing foundation. But this is not stopping us from even moving and finding out where are from around the world, what can we definitely help to reach and bring as well. So when we elevate together and we reach our goals. We are working on state-of-the-art monitoring technology and techniques that I will be sharing with you shortly. innovative technologies to the enhancement commitment that I just talked about, to the biologically diverse environment and the ecosystem, and making sure as a goal that the sustainability development is an integral part of the overall development planning in all parts of life within the Red Sea Zone. Next slide, please. Now, when we touched about sustainability, we are definitely having the commitment to pioneer regenerative approach. And these are few of the commitments that we have set in the renewable energy, the net conservation of 30%, the free single-use plastics by the end of the development, the carbon neutral, zero waste of a landfill, and definitely some of them which is related to the clean mobility, integrated sustainable food production. But again, some of will be skeptical, saying, come on, these are all kind of visions, but definitely we have a plan for it. We're going with a phased approach. We're not just going to be saying all or nothing. But the most important thing before we move into any implementation on the ground, we have to make sure that our regulatory framework for any aspect of work that is on the ground is well set, aligned with all aspects of the government as well. And then we move into the possibility of implementations on pilot and then the scalability. So it will cover the big part of the SEZ and not why just to move into the bigger part of Saudi Arabia. Next slide, please. Here, just to share with you our efforts that we are doing on the ground as part of our assessment and monitoring. And I will share with you some of our achievements as well. So prior to any monitoring that is done on the ground, we need to make sure that we have the proper baseline assessment. And this is what we are doing through the comprehensive marine and terrestrial habitat maps, where we are defining the water and the sediments and the key biological habitats within these areas. Then after that, we are utilizing 3 pillars in our monitoring. First of all, state of the art, as I've just mentioned. Second, in-house expertise. And I have to stop at that. We're not gonna rely on others to come and do the work, and then we have that kind of a change from one contractor to another. We have to build the in-house knowledge, and we are keen to work on that. And the third will be definitely through our collaboration and cooperation with national and international entities. And that through the development of our integrated ecosystem, systematic monitoring program, it will help us to track the short and the long-term environmental changes. It will support the project and its movement and its planning, and also to satisfy all the needs that are requirements. And definitely that we will now trying to adopt the concept of the science-informed adaptive ecosystem-based management for biodiversity enhancement efforts. Just to share with you some of our achievements over here, we have completed the first round, and the picture on the left of the assessment for the seawater nutrients, the concentrations of heavy metals, the total nitrogen and the total carbon, and the 45 sites were covered. Now we're going into another coverage and moving into the bigger part of the SEZ. You see on the picture next to it, this is part of our expertise on the ground. We have made sure that our subject matter experts are diverse from other different parts of the world. And definitely one of their mandate is to transfer the knowledge to be also local on the long run. And another part that we will celebrate is through the collaboration. And we have our photos of few, to just name the few, not many, the collaboration that we are doing with KAUST, the collaboration that we're doing with the National Center of Wildlife, and also the National Center of Environmental Compliance. Part of our biological habitats and what we are working on, by the way, this is PDF or a PowerPoint? PDF. So unfortunately, there was like a video that I wanted to show you there as part of our assessment on the 2D and a 3D assessment of the corals. Also, we're utilizing the artificial intelligence to be able to utilize the manpower needed to assess the density of the corals and what are the different types that are in there. When we talk about the picture on the left, down to the left, that is for the biological habitats of the different sooty falcons that we have identified that they are in parts of the islands, and we are tracking their movements to make sure where they are and to minimize the impact of any developments on them as well. the mangrove and the corals are key pillars of our monitoring and assessment on the ground. Next slide, please. This is just to show you some of our enhancement efforts over there. On the left, we have the marine habitat. And this is all happening with amazing collaboration with national and international entities. We are now working on the establishing coral nurseries. And this is part that we have, before just we started, I discussed that with my dear professor, Dr. Gurban, on how can we work on the implementations? Why don't we just, and Dr. Gurban kindly suggested that, why don't we just even work and try to implement that in another area along the Red Sea to check what are the change of conditions and how can that impact our efforts and the enhancement. On the left, we have our hopefully future collaboration that we're having with EON and with the Sea Corps and the capturing all the coral spawning. And we have implemented a pilot that proved to be very successful. On anybody who would like to have any idea on how the progress of that, please come and see me after the presentation. Another part that I haven't touched on, which is over here, because I prepared many slides, but said I will give the chance to my colleagues to go over it, which is the marine protected area. The approach that we are doing definitely is needed. It's known of what are the advantages that we will have, but there is a very important aspect that we have to evaluate before we move forward, which is the social aspect. And that's where you will see in the next slide, because we don't want to put a ban that could affect the social aspect and perspective and the communities that are relying on that. Now, everything that we are monitoring, assessing, enhancing, it's going to go as part of our vision for a smart environment platform. As an output, that definitely will help us with our enhancement efforts to protect the environment, but also at the same time, we need to focus that we would like others to be partners with us, our visitors to be sharing this amazing experience. So it will be part of the enhancement of visitor experience where they can monitor and assess through that digital smart environment platform, all the efforts that are happening on the ground. Next slide, please. So over here, I cannot just ignore the fact of what we need to do as part of our social regeneration. We are now going to be, by the end of that project, we're going to be creating, by the way, the total jobs of what is direct and indirect of everybody who's going to be working within these two projects, for 70,000 for the Red Sea and Amal around 50,000, and also our contribution into the GDP. Can we go to the next slide? Over here, it shows the efforts that we're doing. When we talk about the nearby communities, we cannot just move blindly and enforce something on them. We are doing that with definitely a proper approach, where we're doing the assessment. These are the areas that you see it on the right with the brown that we have completed, and the ones that are in blue that is in progress. We're moving into surveys, meeting one-to-one. We're going to be taking pictures, taking videos in all aspects of the social, economic, and culture. So if we put any plan that is going to be touching on these communities, definitely it is well tailored to all. Can we go to the second one? Over here, it shows part of what are our programs and initiatives and tracks. I'm going to share one program. There is an area within the Red Sea where all water activities were banned for a period of time. That has an impact on some of the people who are working there. So what we didn't just sit and watch this community getting affected. We right away jumped into it, and we have developed a training program for the maritime operation. And this training program, it's being funded by different entities and by the company itself, where we're going to give the proper training to the local communities, so they will be able to be part of being boat captains for the quality and maintenance, and also for the logistics as well. This is what we do. If we are faced with any problem, we have to find a solution, especially the social aspects of it. Can we go to the next one? So over here, just to give you kind of a feel of how we are trying our best to transform the kingdom through the blue economy. We are definitely, all of our work is aligned with the 17 SDGs. We want to diversify the kingdoms and helping raise tourism revenue. We want to contribute into the GDP of the kingdom, creating jobs and helping increase the women participation from 22% and 30%. Next slide, please. So just how we'll be able to reach to these goals that we are definitely set for ourselves. We are definitely going sustainability to preserve our unique natural heritage for generation to come. But let me share something really important here, that the spirit of our organization, trickling from the CEO, John Pagano, to everyone. We are working with the spirit of, with any potential partner, with open minds, open hearts, and definitely open hearts and open minds and open arms. That one day we will work all together to celebrate all these achievements that will not only definitely have an amazing impact on the Saudi Arabia, but will have a positive global impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Atas. Congratulations on your promotion, by the way. Your plan is extremely inspiring. Thank you. This last picture is breathtaking. Thank you for sharing a lot of what the Red Sea development company is doing. I was fortunate enough to visit your company not too long ago, and I saw firsthand all of these extraordinary things that you're doing. To all of you here in the panel, I have to thank you for the fact that you have, and I think it's very hopeful for the UN Oceans Conference in Lisbon. I'm reminded that the Secretary General of the United Nations has told delegations, please come with a plan, don't come with a speech. And I think today we have listened to very tangible, concrete plans, and I think you have a lot, Saudi Arabia has a lot to showcase in Lisbon, so we're looking forward to it. So before I just give the floor to maybe a couple of questions, I think we're almost on the time. I just wanted to also let you know that Portugal is doing his chair in terms of the MPAs, the Marine Protected Areas. We have put forward a proposal to establish a largest marine protected area in the North Atlantic, based on the coast of Portugal. And we're also doing a conservation site in the Azores with the Air Center. So I don't know if we have maybe 5 minutes for one or two questions. I see one over there, please.
My question is to Dr. Omar. Thank you for your excellent presentation. I'd like to ask you about how you work with the Saudi Human Rights Commission in order to ensure due diligence and the human rights-based approach to the implementation of these big projects and big schemes.
Okay. So you took me away from the environment and definitely took me into another area. But I can assure you that all of our work that we do, that it is definitely going through an amazing department that we have, which is definitely ensuring through the governance, the proper governance, risk, and the compliance, that we are definitely have that as an integral part of our work within the company and within the special economy zone as well. Again, to go and elaborate more, I would love to discuss that with you on the side. Definitely, I have the subject matter experts who can definitely help you.
Anyone else would like to ask a question? Otherwise, I think we'll stop here. We're just on the mark of our time. Thank you again, gentlemen, for being so concise.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we switch.
Yes, and thank you for your distinguished panelists. And now we will move to the second panel. Focus on meetings.
الله يسلمك بخير ان شاء الله.
And I have the honor to invite His Excellency Ambassador Peter William, Ambassador of the Republic of Kenya, and his panelists. Thank you very much. Excellency.
Inshallah, we'll have the pleasure.
Where are my panelists? Please.
I will invite your panelists.
Please.
Dr. Khalid Isfahani, he's of the Foundation for the Conservation of Coral Reefs and Turtles. We have Dr. Sam Porkis, he will join us online.
I'm here, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Please.
And Professor Carlos Duarte from KAUST.
Thank you. May I, from the outset, thank my colleague, my dear colleague, Ambassador Nuno, for moderating the first session very successfully, and to express my appreciation to the panelists and the resource persons for their insights and a job well done. I think Ambassador Nuno, the science is already there. I could see the passion amongst the panelists. I think what remains is for all of us to garner the political will and to get the action in process. I have the pleasure this afternoon to chair this session. I have a very distinguished team of panelists. Next to me is Dr. Khalid. He's the CEO of the Foundation for the Conservation of Coral Reefs and Sea Turtles. Next to me. And we will be hearing from Dr. Sam, who will be reaching out to us virtually. I think all the way from the US. I understand he's in Miami. And we have with us Professor Carlos Duarte from King Abdallah University of Science and Technology. Our theme for this session is clear: increasing scientific knowledge and developing research capacity and transfer of marine technology. And as I already said, I don't think there is any doubt about the depth of science in this area. And I am convinced that this session will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that what is lacking is not science. Science is already there. What we still lack is the political will amongst states globally to ensure that we all save our oceans. And without further ado, it is indeed my pleasure now to invite Dr. Khalid to present your part. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. By coincidence, this subject, I have a personal experience with it, how science can serve the society. Without knowing the purpose of getting the science, it would be very difficult to know what you are going to do after you graduate from high school or even university. I am going in 4 minutes brief about my personal story and how we utilize science after that to help the social community. So I attended my bachelor's degree at King Abdulaziz University as a physical oceanographer. At that time, it just happened. I was good at physics. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do after I graduate from that area. And then I just, like anyone joining the universities at that time, it's just getting the certificate, and I don't know what the life will get me there. Once I get graduated, I joined a master's degree in coastal zone management. So there is a pure science, which is physics, and then we complement it with management. At that time, I would understand how our science can help the society, especially at the coastal zone management, how to develop marine protected areas, and how also for any coastal developments, how we deal with it based on EIAs and regulations. It happens after I graduated, I was wishing to continue for my PhD degree at that time. It was 2009. One of my professors rejected to give me a recommendation letter. He said, go and work, get some experience, and get your PhD. Because without really understanding what's the needs for the society, you wouldn't be able to serve them. At that time, I was very annoyed, I just want to get done with it, get a PhD, and that's it. And then I joined Saudi Aramco back at 2010. It happened, I joined Environmental Protection Department, Marine Division. And then I worked on industrial oil and gas businesses, extraction the oil, coastal development, some water discharge to marine environment. And then at that time, Saudi Aramco was leaders in providing regulation and standard for environment. I started learning little by little till Saudi Aramco announced that they're going to explore oil and gas in Northern Red Sea. And then they sent me to KAUST to get my PhD degree because they want to ensure that they have a proper database assessment to ensure that they are not having an adverse impact on marine environment. And then they sent me 5 years, getting my master's degree, utilizing the state-of-art technologies for the 4th Industrial Revolution, we call it now, and almost the 5th Industrial Revolution Center. We utilized sea gliders to collect some data. And now we have, as a result, we established Marine Research Center at that time as a Saudi Aramco in KAUST and still serving for that purposes. Moving from there, I get escalated in that level till I head the Environmental Protection Department, the Environmental Marine Protection Division in Saudi Aramco. I start getting border pictures, start guiding people how to help their science, how they help the economy, the social economy. Now, getting in this role as a CEO, being the head of protecting coral reef and sea turtles in the Red Sea, first, what's the need? Why we're doing that? What's the cause of these degradations? Without having the science, we wouldn't know the cause. For example, let's focus on now about the coral reef. What the main threats of coral reefs? Climate change, this is natural. Even though some people, they debate that we are, as a human, the cause for that. Second thing, it's land-based pollution. And third, which is unsustainable fishing activities. This is the main threat. How we identify these could be the main threat? Through the science. How we know that raising sea level would, for example, lead for coral bleaching? How we would know that it would occupy some of the turtle nesting in the future? How we plan for our property? How far from the coast we should take it? So all these would help in the economic for the kingdom and even for any other nation. What the most precious assets, natural assets for any nation is their environmental assets, which is coral reef and all these wildlife things. What makes some locations very premier? It is location, and it's a pristine environment. Without saving this, let's talk about for example, all projects that on the coastal area, look at the price of the land, restaurants, cafes, hotels, diving activities, tourism, all these kind of things, because there is a healthy environmental ecosystem over there. Their value would decrease with decreasing the environmental assets. I hope I deliver the message for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was short and sweet. And it's commonsensical. If you have a beachfront that is not very pleasant, not pristine, and has awful smell, I didn't want to use the word, the value of property on the land side go down. Perfect. Without a further ado, I think we invite our second presenter, which will be virtual, to give us his presentation.
I would love to do that. I have a presentation to give, but you have to allow me to share my screen if you'd be so kind. You're muted now. Now I hear you. Would you allow me to share my screen, please? It's a setting on your side.
Yeah.
Oh no, you have to press a button. It says it's disabled.
Working on this. Just bear with us for a little bit. We'll get you connected.
That's perfect. I'm bearing.
You know, you should be able to share.
How's that? Do you see it?
Good.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So this presentation is from the Khaled bin Sultan Living Oceans Foundation. We've done a lot of work in the Red Sea. My name's Sam Perkis. I'm the chief scientist for the foundation. And I really want to concentrate here on accessible, affordable data sharing as it pertains to the marine environment. And central to that initiative is the foundation's Global Reef Expedition. This was a global baseline of reef health, started in 2006, finished in 2015, and it covered 15 countries. And we visited more than 1,000 reef sites, the remotest examples in the world's oceans, involving more than 200 scientists. This is the route that we took on the Global Reef Expedition. And most important is here in F, because we started the expedition in the Red Sea and spent a large number of years there developing our protocols. And you can see down here in the bottom that we set a baseline more than 15 years ago for the Red Sea site and the Neom sites in the north. Having finished in the coastline of Saudi Arabia, we moved to the Atlantic and then the Galapagos, all through the South Pacific, up through the Great Barrier Reef and the Coral Triangle, before finishing the expedition in 2015 in the Chagos Archipelago in the central Indian Ocean. Now, the philosophy of the Foundation's Global Reef Expedition was a marriage between traditional field work and high-tech remote sensing solutions. And we were able to do that through access to this wonderful research vessel, the Golden Shadow, which has an aircraft on the back from which we could start to develop our remote sensing workflows. First, though, to what we did in the field, where we surveyed all the traditional metrics of reef resilience, such as the fish biomass and diversity, and the benthic environment, the corals, the algae, and the sessile invertebrates. And as you can see here from our expedition by the numbers, we completed more than 8,000 of these surveys along our global transect. But one thing that you quickly realize when you're working in the field as a scuba diver is that you're assessing the marine environment at a scale which is grossly offset from the scale of which the reefs are growing. They sprawl over thousands of square kilometers in many cases. And you're also working at a scale which is offset from the problems that the reefs are facing, the global decline, what we call the global reef crisis. So with that, we switched our attention to marrying these field surveys with remote sensing, and we took the aircraft from the vessel and instrumentalized it with hyperspectral sensors to survey reefs. And the foundation had a lot of experience in the past with the physics of light in water, and we had remote sensing workflows which could be scaled up until this global expedition. I give an example here from the Solomon Islands, where you see the beautiful satellite imagery in the top. We can then derive the bathymetry to make a 3D topographic map of the sea floor. That's one of the main asks that we have from reef managers that we encountered during our work. And then finally, we produced the benthic habitat maps, as I show here, for the Solomon Islands, where the different colors here represent the distribution of the different critical habitats on the seafloor, such as seagrasses and the corals themselves. Now, in the interest of accessibility and affordability, as we share our data, these are all packaged up at no cost to the host nations and the conservation community, both as hard copy atlases, and I show in the upper left there the one that we created for the Red Sea, and the bottom right is for the Bahamas. And of course, all of those data are also compiled on an interactive mapping portal hosted by the foundation, and you can see the URL up there in the upper right corner. So for any one of these 15 countries that we visited, this is the typical presentation on the map portal. We have the high resolution remote sensing imagery on the left, the seafloor bathymetry in the middle, and the high resolution benthic habitat maps on the right-hand side. And as I say, this was done extensively through the Saudi Arabian coastline of the Red Sea. What differentiates the foundation's work in this arena is the number of classes which are mapped from the remote sensing data. We adopt 36 classes, many more than other initiatives, as I'm going to show you shortly, but these can be slimmed down to biological cover or geomorphological structure or zone to make the foundation's maps compatible with initiatives such as federally funded by NOAA in the United States. I'll just give an example of how the foundation's products differ from the global initiatives which have followed it. Over here on the left, we have an example from Tonga of 36 classes mapping the seafloor. In the middle here is the Allen Coral Atlas. This was recently completed. It's a global initiative, and you can see some really key differences. The first of which is that the foundation maps to 36 classes and the Allen Coral Atlas to only 6. The spatial fidelity is very different. The foundation's products are much higher resolution. And then there's the depth. We map down to 25 meters water depth, whereas these global initiatives only down to 15. And that makes a very big difference in the amount of the reef that you're appraising. Consider that then the Millennium Coral Reef Mapping Project, another global initiative on the right, which is of even cruder resolution and uses only 5 classes. So for the areas that the foundation visited, we have complementary map products to support marine conservation. That's an overview of the science the foundation has accomplished. Next, I want to talk about education and outreach, because ocean literacy is one of the main pillars of the foundation's activities. And the keystone deliverable for that is our coral reef ecology curriculum. This is aimed at middle and secondary school students and their teachers. We have more than 10,000 registered users and more than 650,000 visitors to the site, all accessible and available at no cost to the education community. And to promote the uptake of this curriculum with the youth of today, we're employing tools like virtual reality to promote it even further. The foundation also has a mangrove education and restoration program pioneered in Jamaica and the Bahamas. More than 800 students have graduated from that. And we have the Science Without Borders Challenge, which is a art competition, which we've so far received entries from more than 94 countries and about 800 entries per year over 10 years that we've run this fabulous initiative. From education now to outreach, the foundation puts a lot of emphasis on producing documentary films, more than 100 in total. They've won 26 prestigious awards and been viewed online nearly 3 million times. And the latest installment from that is Our Living Oceans. This is an EarthX TV original series. The Global Reef Expedition is now finished, and we have to cast our eyes towards the future. And the future of the foundation lies with a strategic partnership that we've created with NASA through a Space Act agreement, where we're levering 2 cutting-edge technologies, the FluidCam and the NemoNet deep learning algorithm. FluidCam is a remote sensing tool. It's currently mounted on a drone, but in 2023 or early 2024, we have a launch date to put FluidCam in orbit on a Boeing rocket as a technology demonstration. And FluidCam revolutionizes the way that we can look at the seabeds. And what it does, as I show you in this computer simulation, is it capitalizes on the ocean waves as they move across the ocean surface to magnify the sea floor. So we can produce much higher resolution images of the seabed from orbit, equivalent to what divers are seeing on the ground. And you can see that magnification in process here in the simulation. This is what FluidCam delivers. So this is data set collected in Guam, and you see the standard image you'd get from a satellite or an aircraft, and this central strip here has been fluid lensed. It essentially removes the water and allows us to image the seafloor with sub-centimeter precision, such that we can even identify the species of the corals and count the fish which are swimming amongst them. On the right-hand side there, you have a bathymetry model, which is an output from the algorithm. All of those data take a lot of processing, so the Foundation's partnered with NASA on a gaming app where citizen scientists can then interpret images of the seafloor to provide input into a neural network, which then produce the global maps that we're planning to do. That has come about by a new project with NASA called Marineverse, where we're going to map, instead of just 65,000 square kilometers of the world's reefs as we did with the Global Reef Expedition, we're going to now map every reef on Earth down at the finest scale and largest extent that has ever been achieved in the past. But for the very first time, these maps will be time resolved. So we can see how the reefs are changing at 16-day intervals between 2000 and 2023 to track ecosystem trajectory and biodiversity through time. So in conclusion, the Living Oceans Foundation has used technology for marine conservation, but we're acutely aware that not all nations have access to that. And so we've strongly predicated our work onto online portals where anybody and everyone can access these data at no cost. We promote the sharing of data because we see it's an important way of enacting change. We have used technology in education and outreach to improve ocean literacy across genders and generations, and also applied the most cutting-edge new technology, such as partnering with NASA on our fluid lensing work, and also the deep use of virtual reality in our education programs. So with that, I want to say a thank you, but the biggest thank you of all goes to His Royal Highness, Prince Khaled bin Sultan. It was his leadership, vision, and generosity which made all of this work possible. We could not have completed the Global Reef Expedition without his financial support and use of the research vessel Golden Shadow. And the expedition wouldn't have been possible without the support of all the host countries that we visited, our partners, and the hundreds of scientists who donated their time and expertise to this endeavor. And if you'd like any further detail, I'm happy to answer questions, but please do visit our website, lof.org, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you so very much for your very powerful presentation. You made it very clear, very absolutely clear, that there is no shortage of scientific insight, knowledge, and capacity. I was personally very thrilled that in your outreach program, you've reached out to NASA and you're doing, satellite imagery. I mean, this is completely way beyond imagination, from the traditional sense of conducting research using vessels floating on the oceans. And you've answered, our important question about the affordability and accessibility, particularly for those states or nations that have limited capacity to access this kind of scientific knowledge in order to save the oceans that are within their borders. I think with that, we can move to our final panelists, Professor Carlos, who will be answering, as part of his presentation, the issue of collaboration in scientific research and technological development in support of a healthy and blue economy. Again, as part of the scientific knowledge that is requisite in order for us as human beings to save our oceans. Please, Professor.
Thank you very much to your excellencies and royal highnesses and colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very, very happy to participate in this event. And I would like to congratulate Ambassador Matias and also Ambassador Olgego and Your Excellency Natalie Fustier for organizing this event and hosting us here in the UN regional office. And I learned a couple of things that I need to develop. One of them is to provide a personal story of a journey, and the other one is talk about a partnership. So on the personal journey, then really the Blue Talk that we are developing here takes us eventually to the UN Oceans Conference in Lisbon. And I have dedicated 40 years or 50 years of my life to oceans. So that is really a destiny. I'm meeting my destiny in Lisbon. By meeting my destiny between Lisbon is also where my life started. So I was born in Lisbon. I've been walking through the oceans for 50 years. And now I've been adopted by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I will be proudly joining, hopefully, inshallah, the UN conference in Lisbon as part of the Saudi delegation. So I think that really brings together a lot of components of this event. And also I'm a scientific advisor to the UN World Marine Heritage Program of the UNESCO. So that also links me more to the UN family as well. So that's my personal story that brings me to Lisbon, but I'm not going there just to visit family or enjoy with friends. I'm going there with a purpose, and the purpose is to contribute to deliver SDG 14. And SDG 14 is not just about conserving the oceans. That was probably the ethics of the 1990s. In the 1990s, our ambition was to conserve what we had, and we failed. Because between the 1990s and 2020, we have lost about 1/3 of the blue natural capital of the oceans in those 30 years. And during my lifespan that started in Lisbon, we've lost about half of the blue natural capital of the oceans. So the ambition cannot be to conserve the little that we have left. The ambition has to be to rebuild what we lost. And that is possible. So in 2020, my colleagues and led by my colleague, Professor Susana Agustí at KAUST, and myself, we published a paper in the journal Nature called Rebuilding Marine Life. And in that paper, we critically assess scientific evidence to conclude that it's possible to rebuild the abundance of life in the oceans that we lost, not completely, but largely, and that this is possible within one human generation, that is by 2050. And we produce a roadmap of how to achieve that ambition, because we also are aware that we are the last generation that can achieve that. If we fail in doing that, our children and our grandchildren will not be able to recover what we lost. So that comes with a moral responsibility, an ethical responsibility to achieving that, but it's also a very good business proposition, because for every dollar that is invested in rebuilding the oceans, then we can recover $10 in real market returns. So it is no wonder then that the Red Sea Development Company, which is a private company which main mandate is also to contribute to improving and diversifying the economy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia under Vision 2030, is again not aspiring to just conserve, it's aspiring, as we heard from Dr. Omar Alatas, it's aspiring to regenerate and actually to improve the conservation value of the site by 30%. So the new ambition is no longer to conserve, the ambition is to rebuild, to regenerate, and rebuild marine life. And we know how to do it. In that paper, we put forward a strategy of how to achieve that. That includes protecting species, protecting spaces. And we heard from Dr. Mohammed Kurban that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has joined many nations in the world to pledge to protect 30% of the ocean space by 2030. So we have a target and we have a timeline to achieving that. We also need to remove pollution. We also need to harvest wisely so we avoid depleting the fish stocks from the oceans, and we continue to enjoy the health benefits of blue foods. And we also need to mitigate climate change with the highest of our ambitions. But there's one sixth requirement that often when I'm asked what is the greatest threat to the ocean, is not climate change, it's not pollution, it's not overfishing. The greatest threat to the ocean is that we give up on the dream of enjoying healthy oceans and handing over a healthy ocean to our children and our grandchildren. In fact, I have one of those, and that having a grandchild has been very inspiring for me because now I can put a face to the future generations, and I feel responsible towards him. That I have to do the best within my power to achieve that. So I think that's what we need to do, rebuild marine life. We know how to do it, and we're going to gather in Lisbon to achieve this dream. But obviously it is a grand challenge, and that grand challenge comes with the need for major investments. Comes with a need for partnerships, but it also comes with a need for new technologies and new approaches and science to be able to achieve this goal. So I will give you now a couple of examples of where are we lagging behind in terms of the ambition of our science and technology to achieve that vision. So if we can move to the next slide, I'm actually taking you to Mars, not to planet Earth. And what you see there is a photograph of Mars Perseverance, which is the most sophisticated geochemical robot that humankind has ever produced. And the world watched the landing of this robot in the surface of Mars on February 18th of 2021. And we actually watched that landing within 3 minutes from that actually happening. So there was a system actually produced by Spanish colleagues that relayed the image from the landing support system to a Viking spacecraft that was orbiting Mars. And then that Viking spacecraft then sent the signal to planet Earth. That's 50 million kilometers away, right? So this is, I would say, the benchmark of where we are in space exploration. Now, the next slide shows where we are in marine exploration. What you see there is a Rosette and a CTD probe, which is still the workhorse of how we explore and probe the oceans. It's basically a cable with a sampling instrument, right? The gap in technology is immense. And even today in 2022, we're still to broadcast one image from the seafloor to the surface without cables. We have done that in Mars, 50 million kilometers away. We have not achieved that yet from the seafloor, 3 kilometers away. And it is not technology, it is lack of ambition, sheer lack of ambition that is responsible for that gap. And the gap is not getting any narrower, it's actually growing and getting bigger. And I would submit that we should invest more in the ocean than we should invest in Mars. The population of humans in Mars is so far zero. There are ambitions to get that population a bit higher up. But even if we look at the ocean today, there's probably about 1 to 3 million people who actually live in the ocean, not by the shore, at sea, in vessels. Actually, 100 of those are colleagues of Dr. Mohammed and myself, because Dr. Mohammed is leading a very important expedition for the kingdom, that is the Red Sea Decade expedition, with 2 vessels, 2 submersibles, a helicopter, and a number of other sophisticated instruments that is assessing biodiversity in the economic exclusive zone of the Red Sea for the first time using advanced genomics. So there are about 100 of us, of my colleagues and Dr. Mohammed's colleague at sea now in 2 vessels, and they spend much of their time there. So it's probably 1 to 3 million people anytime in the world that actually are living at sea. And there's about 3 billion people who live in the coastal ocean. And we are responsible for them. We are responsible for the well-being of them and their future generations. I don't really see many people in Mars that requires a stewardship of that planet. So why don't we look from Mars to the Earth rather than look from Earth to Mars and invest in what it takes to bring the ambition of our technology to what we need in the ocean. So that is really a snapshot to give you a sense of how far we are lagging behind in terms of the ambition that we need to deploy in the ocean, and we need to partner with NASA, but we actually need to create the new NASA for the ocean. And I would like to also remind everyone that many of you attended the Saudi Green Initiative in October last year, and Dr. Osama Fakia was actually leading the working group that delivered many of the projects that were presented. But His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman made an announcement, and the announcement is that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going to establish also an Ocean and Seas Exploration Foundation. So we will probably have, through the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a NASA for the oceans. We don't need to partner with NASA to have more instruments in Mars. We need to create a new NASA for the oceans, and the mission of that organization says that it will explore the oceans for the benefit of humankind, because the ocean is really a legacy for all of us, not just for a few of the privileged or the rich that now go into space and sell tickets to go to the moon for I don't know how many million. So we need that NASA for the oceans, and I'm very proud of being a faculty in a Saudi institution that now is meeting that ambition that we need to create that NASA for the oceans. We will find out exactly what shape that takes, so I'm very eager to learn more about how this develop. But for me, it's been a great piece of news in taking some steps to reach this gap. So if we go to the next slide, I would like to provide another benchmark, which is the Ocean Decade. So this year, the UN declared the initiation of the Ocean Decade for Science for Sustainable Development. And it identified 11 challenges, which are listed there. I concur with all 11, but I missed one, which is to bridge the gap in technology. There's really not one challenge in that list that is about technology development. So I think there is a gap in the ambition of the Ocean Decade, and I would like someone, and hopefully the UN too, to maybe amend this list with 12th bullet, which will be accelerating the technology to be able to address all of those 11 goals that are there, because with the existing technology, we will fall short of ambition. So, but anyway, we are operating in the Ocean Decade, and my colleagues in the scientific community are very busy delivering all of those 11 ambitions, but I hope we're able to add one more ambition to that list. In the next slide, I would like to then give you another example why it is important that we raise ambition, and also why it is important that we develop this new technology in a way that will be equitable and accessible to all. So this is from a paper we published last year called the Ocean Genome and Future Prospects for Conservation Equity. This is actually an outcome of work that I did with colleagues as a member of the expert group that supports the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, of which the governments of Portugal and Kenya are members, and they have been preparing foundational documents to form the basis of discussions of the UN Conference on Oceans in a month from now. And this is a very important resource, because the ocean genome is not only contains a footprint of the evolution of life in the planet, but it actually contains many potential tools to solve our problems. So this slide shows the decrease in the cost of sequencing over time. So the cost of sequencing has decreased 5,000 times over the last decade. And on the right, you see the increase in the number of gene sequences of marine organisms over time. So we are now in the era of genomics, and the era of genomics is going to be a big underpinning of ocean exploration. So we mentioned that in the expedition led by Dr. Mohammed Kurban, the Red Sea Decade expedition, we're using genomics to assess biodiversity in the Red Sea, no longer conventional taxonomy, but genomics. But there's much more to that. So in the next slide, you can see in the next slide, you can see that the number of species that have been subject to patents of genes for commercial uses has risen quickly, and that also the number of genes that have been patented is about 12,000 as of now. You know, some of these patents are very important. And for instance, everybody knows by now what a PCR is. Perhaps 3 years ago, not everybody knew what a PCR is, but the PCR actually stands for polymerase chain reaction. So that is a reaction that is coded by a protein. And the protein that we've been using, all of us in that room today, for the last 3 years actually comes from bacteria from hydrothermal vents, from submarine volcanoes. That protein is present in almost all organisms, but why it is important that it comes from bacteria isolated from a submarine volcano, because that bacteria can grow at 90-degree temperature where proteins usually denaturalize. And because it is stable at high temperature, it can actually catalyze the process very, very fast. Because at higher temperature, then the reactions are much faster. So that means that we can get a PCR within 2 hours rather than a week, right? So that we all have been benefit from that bacteria, from a hydrothermal vent, to be able to live our lives safely during the pandemic. But there's many more to that. And you can see that there's a little plateau at the last 5 years. This is actually an outcome of uncertainty as to who owns the genome of the ocean. So there is an uncertainty as to who can patent a gene that exists from a natural organism. It is a privatizable good. Should it be part of a common heritage for humankind? Who owns marine biodiversity? And the Nagoya Protocol has created some uncertainty as to the intellectual property of marine genetic resources, which has slowed down investments. And the reason will be clear on the next slide, where you see the ownership of patents. So we published this paper on the left in 2011, and actually the paper was called Who Owns Marine Biodiversity, published in the journal Science. And you see that 10 nations, which are the top 10 nations in ownerships of patents, then own about 90% of all the patents on marine genes. At that time, you actually see one country that's actually represented also by the ambassador here of Switzerland, which is the 9th country in the world with, in terms of ownership of marine patents. But actually Switzerland is a landlocked country. So one will wonder where those marine genes come from, certainly not from Swiss territory. So then the question, it is impossible to ascertain from the databases where the organism was collected from. So all of that uncertainty is disturbing, but also we look in the right side, then we actually track which are the private entities that own marine genes, and 47% of all marine genes, patents on marine genes, are owned by a single company, BASF, right? So I think that image is disturbing also in that in the countries in the left, we don't see any developing nation. And the reason for this is that the technology to access the marine resources, which requires sometimes you need advanced robots and submersibles to be able to access these pools of extreme environments, are only accessible to 12 nations in the world. Most of humankind have no access to the deep sea, as we have no access to space. But also on the right, it also shows that the technology is required to participate in exploring this big reservoir of potential economic benefit is only accessible to a number of private entities. So we can move to the next slide, and I'll give another example of how this can be done. So at CAUS, we have developed a global ocean genome project. And really, there are two things that you need to be able to explore the masses of data and the potentials for marine genomics. One is you need a supercomputer. And at CAUS, we have now our second supercomputer. I think it was ranked the 7th most powerful in the world. And then you also need very advanced capacities to handle big data. And that combination of big data and supercomputers now is the main stumbling stone for many nations to be able to access this technology and participate in the genomic exploration of the ocean. So it's no longer the sequencing technology itself, it's actually the capacity to use the data, because the data are now becoming publicly available, but many nations don't have supercomputers and don't even have the sophistication in terms of the capacity for big data analysis required to do this. And yet many of our solutions, not only to COVID, as we discussed earlier, but maybe for solutions to our problems in energy, food, and other sectors, health, are actually embedded in marine genetic resources. So we need to find a way to open up this resource to be participated to the whole global community. And I will finish with another last example. And so that I'm taking too much time, but my colleagues were very generous in being very brief. So, the last example I want to give is with this ambition of rebuilding marine life. So coming back to that ambition, we realized there was a very difficult component to rebuild, which is coral reefs. So coral reefs, we've lost about 2/3 of the world's coral reefs. And the current projection is that even under the most ambitious climate scenario, we will lose 75 to 90% of coral reefs. And this is certainly a prospect that we cannot accept. So I'm actually proud also that faced with that prospect, Dr. Osama Fakia mentioned in his opening statement that he chaired and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as president of the G20, then created a new track on environment that was not existing in the G20 earlier. And His Excellency Dr. Osama Fakia actually led that working group on environment. And that working group tackled that problem. And the outcome of the working group of the G20 tackling that problem was the development, as mentioned also by His Excellency, of a new organization called CORDAP, that is the Global Coral R&D Accelerated Platform. So the fact that we don't have the knowledge today to conserve coral reefs doesn't mean that we need to give up. It means that we need to produce the next best science and technology that should be able to do that. So the CORDAP is now fully operational. So the image in the right is the strategic plan that was just released. There was a press release launched today to announce the strategic plan. And it also makes me proud that the G20 nations, everything is decided by consensus. They actually elected the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as the inaugural chair of the CORDAP in recognition of its leadership in coral stewardship and conservation. So the first physical meeting, because this was developed during the pandemic, will take place in the UN Oceans Conference as an open platform that encourages all from all nations to participate, to rebuild, develop the new technologies to rebuild coral reef, and it makes all of the IP freely available to everybody around the world for this purpose. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very stimulating presentation, and with ease, no efforts. You could see it's flowing in his veins. The passion is there, the science is there. And thank you for highlighting some of the gaps that need to be bridged. That is no longer just conserving. We need to regenerate what we lost. I think that's a very powerful message coming out of this presentation. And also that we need to create the NASA for the oceans. This is very exciting. This is very fascinating. That the attention has been more towards the Mars and the upper places, and yet we have not been able to focus under the sea, which is less than 10 kilometers down, is it? And yet human life sustainability depends very much on how healthy the oceans are. and there is technology as well.
Mhm.
So how do we shift attention and incentivize ambition to invent technologies that will take us down? I think this should not be a rocket science. It's very exciting as a run-up towards Lisbon. I think Ambassador Nuno and Natalie, I think the Riyadh talks has done what we needed to do. And I want to thank you very much for your part of presentation.
Thank you.
As well as the two others, Doctor, and our virtual presentation for a very powerful presentation. We have a few minutes. If you have any thoughts to share with us, feel free from the audience. Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fentel Hudri. I'm from the Saudi Fund for Development. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the invitation and for both embassies. This is such a great talk. Also, the panelists gave great thoughts about how the kingdom is protecting its shores, oceans, and coastlines, environmentally protection, and so on. Also, I would like to add that the Saudi Fund for Development, the kingdom is taking care of not only the local oceans surrounding Saudi Arabia, but it's also protecting coastlines and shores in these developed countries. At the Saudi Fund for Development, we have more than 9 agreements, 8 projects worth more than 684 million Saudi riyals in coastline and protection of shores projects. This is in Africa and in Asia. And as mentioned, a healthy ocean equals a healthy world. And this is the future generations that we work together in partnership for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that intervention. Any observations? Yes, yes, Ambassador.
Sorry for that. Professor Duarte, thank you for making that point. I don't think it is patenting of genomes and so forth is a question of nations, of countries. It's a question of how research is organized. If it is organized and financed by public money, that's one thing. If you need private companies to participate, they want patent protection, not only for the oceans, it's everywhere. And so it's not about the question being a landlocked country, where the patents are registered, whether it's going to be in the United States, whether it might be in Saudi Arabia. It's a basic question how you fund it and organize it.
Yes, Ambassador. Yeah, so that point is very well taken, Ambassador. And in fact, in 2011, when we published that paper led to the creation of a working group under the UN Law of the Sea to try to resolve the governance of the marine genome, because it's really not the product of anybody's ingenuity in the lab. Is a product of evolution. And so that working group was created, and we were actually faced with a challenge that is common to many problems in the ocean, which is the tragedy of the commons. So I would say the original sin comes with the Justinian legal code. Already in Roman times, we declare the ocean terra nullis. So the ocean belongs to no one. And, we have created a bit of parcel 200 economic exclusive zones and so on, but still 60% of the ocean belongs to no one. So the governance of that resource still is unresolved. And what happens is that the UN Law of the Sea declared themselves, not competent, I shouldn't say competent, not competent to rule about biological resources, and handed over the hot potato to the Convention for Biological Diversity. Because at that point, the UN Law of the Sea, they only rule on mineral resources in the high seas. So they gave biodiversity to the UN Convention for Biological Diversity, which actually signals there is a need to start creating bridges between the different conventions in the UN, because the problems are not siloed, the problems are connected. So the UN Convention for Biological Diversity, then they created the Nagoya Protocol, with then rules at the ownership of the biological resources of the ocean in terms of the economic exclusive zone where they were sourced from. The problem with that is that imagine that there is a particular bacteria which, and it's not, let's do a real world example. There's a small invertebrate, a hydrozoan, which doesn't look like much. It's a few millimeter size. If you are scuba diving, you will not even notice it. But that hydrozoan is actually the source of a chemical that is the basis of an anti-cancer drug called Yondelis. The annual revenue from Yondelis is about $100 million per year. What just one small product out of many, right? So this hydrozoan is not limited to the economic exclusive zone of a particular nation. Unlike land, the ocean is a very open environment, so you are likely to find the same bacteria, the same organism in multiple economic exclusive zones. So the fact that the one that finds the organism in its waters have a right to patent is really not a reasonable basis to govern the genome of the ocean. What I proposed then is that really there should be benefits for the investor, because I fully agree with you that without benefits to whoever does the investment in developing the technology will freeze, which is what we are seeing now. The technology and the development and the investment is slowing down because of the uncertainty. So there should be some guarantees to whoever invests in the research that there will be some returns on investment, but there should be also a benefit sharing component, and there should be a balance between the two. In my opinion, the benefit sharing is not about the economics of this. The benefit sharing is about access to participate in the exploration, the technology, and the data. So I would welcome the UN to create a global authority that manages that benefit sharing to the less developed, allow the less developed nations to develop the capacity to participate also in exploring the genome of the ocean. So there needs to be a good balance between the investment and recognizing that the global genome of the ocean is probably a world heritage resource that must benefit humankind like the NASA of the ocean will. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, it was not bilateral. That's for our general consumption. So thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sada Hadfi, and I work for Aqua Power. I'm an advocate for climate change and clean energy. Although I'm a scuba diver and I enjoy the corals of the Red Sea, I haven't been honestly so aware of the dark future that is ahead of us and the tragedy that we live in now. And I remember in this event our common agenda that was issued by the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres, where he emphasized on the importance of not only safeguarding the environment for the current generation and the future generation, but the unborn generation. So I would like to invite all the stakeholders here today to ensure that we have better inclusive views in these dialogues, as well as ensuring that there is an inclusion in the process of the policy making of how to make more aware of these issues, because it's really sad that there is no action on ground when it comes to the ocean, where we are a peninsula surrounded by oceans. Thank you.
Well, food. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, I'll just comment on that because I actually believe, and I've been writing, that youth is a nature-based solution to many of our problems. And in fact, I believe that the 17th UN SDGs need to be expanded to 18, because the 18 should be youth empowerment. Because many of the problems we are discussing in sustainability, climate change, rebuilding marine life, and so on, the heavy lifting on solving these problems is going to be done by the next generation, by the youth. So for instance, I work on blue carbon, which is something that I developed which is a climate action based on rebuilding ecosystems that can remove carbon, like mangroves and so on. One requirement to get carbon credits from blue carbon projects is something called permanence. That means it's 100 years of commitment. I can easily sign myself for a 100-year commitment because 10 or 20 years from now, I'll no longer have any liability because I'll no longer be accessible. But it is therefore the next generation, my daughter or my grandson, who are going to hold the commitment during the whole lifespan. So it is very unfair for us to negotiate what actually is effectively their future, and is the future that they will live on. So I would invite you to read. I reflected on that in a piece that was published in Saudi Gazette and in Arabic in the, I don't know, Ozark or the Arabic called Nature-Based Solutions, which I inspired by also what I saw in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in COP26. I saw actually one of my inter students was in the negotiation team, 25-year-old, and I looked around and didn't see many nations. In fact, in that case, Switzerland was the only nation that had somebody in that age class in the negotiation team, in addition to 7 developing nations. So we need to empower the youth to participate in all of this, climate change, biodiversity, because it's about the world that they will live in, not the world that I will live in. So very much agree with you, and we'd like to see an 18th cube there, that it will be called youth empowerment.
Excellent. Anybody else with a bad one? Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to reflect a little bit. Professor Karas, as usual, very enriching. I mean, we can think about what Professor Karas talked about. The science could really lead to really solve our problems and address. And his remarks about it's no longer about conservation. It's about restoration, because we have lost a lot now, and I have to work. And that's not only true for marine environment, it's true for many habitats, for the forest, for the rangelands, for croplands, for many other habitats. So it's really, it's ironic. I mean, Professor Karas talks about how science can unlock the solutions for us to restore marine habitats, and how can science also unlock treasures to use the genomes to solve our problems on land here using that treasure. And I was wondering, for the last 200 years, we have used science to destroy our environment. And this is now reversed, because really we have used our human intellect and innovation really to really provide for our own luxury. You know, if you think about a human 200 years ago, how he lived, how much he consumed, how much really he directly involved, and he works with the environment directly, produce his own agricultural products and consume it in moderation. And now, how much material I need for my car, for my iPhone, for my computer, for my house. All these amenities, because of the knowledge, because of the science, we went and consume more of natural resources to provide more for our humans of luxury. So we have to think about that as well, that type of behavior and science. Not only the science that directly restore marine environment, but the knowledge of can we adjust our behavior, our deal with our natural resources, or how we put our priorities for our own luxury, our own convenience, to what level, and we have to realize the price. It is all interlinked. Most of the impacts on marine environment comes from land-based activities. It comes from factories that are disposing waste or plastic that's generated in land. So it's not think that the solution will happen in the marine. The solution will start from our land-based activities. The solution is not only scientists or government officials, but my own behavior. You know, the other day I was listening to statistics about 30% of the food is lost, either lost or wasted. There is food waste and lost. Imagine how much resources, how much land, how much energy. in producing that food and conserving it, and then we are wasting it. So really, we don't have to build more 30% capacity. If we can really utilize this, and this applies to many things. People think about climate change as a problem, and I always say climate change is a byproduct of a deeper problem. Climate change is a byproduct of unsustainable consumption and production, because now companies are competing to produce more at cheaper prices. Me as a customer, I want more with little. They have to provide for me or they will be out of the market. They have to deliver to me more with less. So they have to cut corners. They have to go to cheaper places to produce or reduce their environmental, cost, or do this or do that. And it is really, we have to realize that these environmental problems is not very distant from my own luxuries. And I have to think about my own behavior. Definitely, we can go to Lisbon and talk about all international agreements, but it is what we do at home, what we do nationally. And I think here in Saudi Arabia, we're taking matters very seriously. You have seen it. We have created the National Center for Environmental Compliance to really monitor the compliance of all entities and make sure that their release of pollutants, comply to environmental standards. The National Waste Management Center has a great task we have 95% of waste going to landfills. The task of the National Center is to reverse it, and only 5% goes to landfills and go near zero. So there is a role for government and organizations, but also we have to think about the problem in a more comprehensive and not isolated. The problems we see in the ocean are not isolated from climate change. It's not isolated from our food consumption, or not isolated from our own, how we build our homes, or how we build our cars, or how we utilize our roads. So really, I think it is interconnected. The science to solve the marine challenges is very important, and I think we need a huge quantum leap there, but also the science to reduce the footprint of our industries, land or marine or other. The science of really how we really balance our conveniences and how we really maybe get more pleasure with less material. I guess maybe we need to think about social science, behavioral science, the science in food conservation. So I think the question of science and human behaviors are all interlinked. And I think we have to think about that, because I totally agree with Professor Carlos. If we do not act now, really, we will lose a lot, and I think will make it very harder to future generation to deal with very little natural resources that we are leaving for them.
Thank you. Well put. In fact, listening to you, both of you actually, if I became a student of philosophy, the pandemic, the positivist scholars, some of them saw the pandemic as a chance for humanity to go minimalist, to check its bad habits, reduce some of its excesses, and consume only what you need. And so I hear you very clearly personally, but I think we need voices. We need voices like professors, because politicians who run states would want to listen to science, and science must be persistent in saying it as it is, for it to be understood. Because the tendency of the world, particularly the market economies, I have no problem with market economies, is maximum production, and excesses ad infinitum. But the consequences is left for scientists to clean. And so striking that balance, I think, is one of the challenges. And I think that voice is coming through in this dialogue. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. I think that will bring us to an end. If you have any other issues, we will have 5 minutes of interaction within the hall. We can share them, but I want to thank the panelists, very illustrious and very eminent scholars. I'm personally very delighted to have been able to chair this session. And I hope the audience would agree with me that we had the very best. And as a run-up towards Lisbon, we could not have had more than this. So we thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And also thank you for your distinguished panelists. I think here we come to the conclusion, and I would like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Natalie to actually say a few closing remarks.
I will be brief. I think it was extremely inspiring. We had a great session, and I feel that it highlights as well a gap in communication, because everything is well known, and as Sarah, I think, was saying, she didn't know to what extent the situation was on the edge of a catastrophe ending. So I think we should try, starting from this Blue Talk dialogue, to do our best to communicate to the youth audience and to as many people as we can the challenges that we are facing, but with a note of hope, because creating more fear, I don't think we help. We live in a world where fear is everywhere, and people are like tired of being afraid of living. So we need to find a way to spread a message of hope. And I think Professor Carlos was very, very good at this, to see the potentialities, the possibilities, rather than things that are closing forever. And I think that the future generation is a way to do this. So personally, I would be very happy to help to add the 12 ambition to the 11 existing for the decade of the ocean. And I would be very happy as a resident coordinator here in Saudi Arabia to help as much as I can our Saudi partners to realize this ambition to preserve the ocean for the future generations. So thank you very much for your patience and for being here today. We have some tea and coffee for those who have some time to networking and exchanging, but a huge thank you to all of you and to my colleague that came to me 2 months ago to ask me if we can organize this Blue Talk, Riyadh Blue Talk together. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Want to have a cup of coffee or cup of tea and news late? Just the other way, the other door. We cross the path and we have.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
This is a very successful and very
Went pretty well.